You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 515. Our Ready for Ahsoka coverage continues with a show that's been in the backlog of ideas for, I want to say, like 2 years. And then when they announced that the Ahsoka series was going to come out, it just kept getting pushed off. And finally, we are here. We're going to be talking about the World Between Worlds, or A World Between Worlds, however you want to call it. And I don't even know, this is a selfish kind of show because we've been wanting to talk about it for so long, but is it really going to play in the Ahsoka series? I think the more I did the research and the more I spent on show notes, I started thinking, I don't think it's going to, but at the same time, we're still going to talk about it because we've been holding off again for the better part of 2 years. And by we, I mean none other than Jonesy, who's with me tonight. As usual, Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Welcome back. It's nice to have you back in seat.
It's good to be back. And I was joking. I don't even know how to do this anymore. So just bear with me. I'm just getting my feet underneath me. But
no, yeah, when Laura and I did the first show, we did the first way station. It was clumsy to say the least. So yeah, we set the bar nice and low for you to come back. So everything increases from here. So no, but fantastic. Yeah, huge thanks to Lauren for filling in while you were out. We had a couple great shows, did a great Patreon show as well. So huge thanks to Lauren. Everybody she did a great job and everybody loved it.
Yep. Awesome. Good to hear. Okay, before we get started, though, I know we've got a lot of business that we need to take care of here.
Got a lot of the business, my friend. So welcome to Rasmus, who joined the We Are All the Republic tier today. So thank you so much, Rasmus. We certainly appreciate it. And a huge thanks to all of our now part of the tribe members: Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, Steve, and Rita Reborn, and our Delusions of Grandeur members, Rod, CJ, and Alex. And of course, all of our amazing people in the live stream tonight. So we have Steph, Alexandra, Music Train, Jack, Sky, Alex, Justin, Jeff, and Jorge. CantinaCast.com/YouTube if you'd like to come out and join the live stream. CantinaCast.com/Patreon if you'd like to check out all of our amazing content. Tonight, we're right back at the Patreon content as well. We're going to do a little Tatooine trading post, a little show and tell for some of the swag we've had. You've been out and about, so I'm curious if you were able to go to, I don't know, let's see. You probably went to a Chipotle while you were out there. Did you go to a Five Below too? Did you check all the Padilla boxes?
So I did not go to a Chipotle. I took a picture of one, but that's as far as I got. I did.
Like within an hour of being there, I get a picture of a Chipotle.
Yeah. It was the first place I went to when I got there, and I thought, what are the odds? Like, it's fate that's brought me to this place. But I did not eat there, but I did go to a Five Below, and I did buy some things, which you will see on the show here at the top of the hour.
Awesome. So that'll be at 10 p.m. Central tonight, right after the show is done. So we hope you all will join us. And then we actually got a really cool, another 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts from Grammy Unicorn, which, 6 stars just from the name. So the review was titled Sabine. Loved this episode. I also hope we get a romance between Ezra and Sabine. Star Wars needs some love.
Yes.
Can't really argue with that. Yeah, I'm on board the Ezra Sabine ship train. I'm all right with that. Does that work? Ship train? Yeah.
Ship train?
Everything's a train with me lately. I don't understand what this is, man.
Train
the last show, it was like the Ahsoka train, the media blitz. Everything's a freaking choo-choo these days. I don't know. Yeah.
And nobody rides a train these days, really.
But they should, because they're so scenic. They're so expensive, though. But anyway, so thank you, Grammy Unicorn, for taking the time to leave us a review. If you'd like to leave us a review out on Apple Podcasts or the other ones, we do try to find them as best we can. Let us know, though. You know all the other great places to find us on social media as well as on the YouTube channel. So please do, if you'd like to, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, let us know, hit the little bell so you know when we're going to be live, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you're liking, what you're digging, what you're thinking, and we try to respond to everything as much as we can. So thank you all for taking the time to do that.
Yep. And this train is about to take off because we are ramping up here very quickly for all of the Ahsoka coverage, which we will be doing tonight. And why don't we get started?
Less than 2 weeks away, man.
I know, it's 2 weeks away. I was crazy. I was looking at the calendar, and I saw that it was the 10th, which, you know, when you're on vacation, you just like have no concept of time, what day you are, what day it is, where you are half the time. And I realized it's like 13 days now before we get the Ahsoka series. So we'll be back. I mean, we're going to be doing this show, although we haven't talked about whether or not we're going to do a day of show or the day after show. I think we're going to have to do a day of, honestly. Maybe
tough,
we just
man.
do kind of a high level kind of thing.
Yeah, and you saw it to me. It's going to be over an hour and a half for the content. I think we saw the official run times with the credits removed. So I think the first one is like 51 minutes or something like that, and the next one's about 38 minutes. So
Yeah, right.
again, I mean, about an hour and a half for the content. So it's going to be a marathon.
Yeah. It's going to be
17-hour live stream on Wednesday night.
it's going to be exactly it. It's going to be a very long live stream. Okay, well, let's get into our main topic, A World Between Worlds. So again, I kind of kicked this off by saying that, you know, we had this show in the backlog for eons at this point. I think ever since this episode aired, the 2 episodes aired during Star Wars Rebels, and you know, at the time it was relevant because it was just so different. You immediately go back to the Mortis episodes and the Clone Wars, the Bendu. There are a couple things out there that just seem so, I'm going to say far out there, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, but they do fit kind of outside the norm that I think we're all used to when we get to Star Wars land, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It was just a very different thing. And so these 2 episodes stood out. This in particular stood out. And I remember when we covered these episodes originally, I think Mike and I may have done that episode, and I think we were both, and I know you and I have had conversations probably in the show, certainly off air, but just about the potency, the risk that something like A World Between Worlds introduces. And we're going to get into whether or not that's time travel versus alternate reality. I mean, I think we're all probably on the same page there, but we'll kind of tease a few things out here. But I guess high level, if you had to pick what you think The World Between Worlds is, how would you describe it? And by the way, we have Dave Filoni's official transcript from when he talked about it. We're going to get into that here a little bit later, but even that's kind of squirrely. It's a little ambiguous, a little bit nebulous at times, and it's not as defining in some areas as others. But in your own words, how do you see The World Between Worlds?
Well, what's really cool is like even within the context of the episodes in Rebels is we have different perspectives. You have Palpatine's perspective, and then you also have Qui-Gon giving a bit of a voiceover that talks about what it is. They both use the word conduit. And I think that's kind of what it is. I mean, it's this intersection of time and space and like the future and past. It's just where everything comes together and is just one big mismatch of everything. I mean, it is the Force, and it's almost like the cosmic force, but in a more tangible kind of way or in a more portal way. I think the really interesting about this is that A World Between Worlds really isn't a gateway to do whatever you want. A lot of times it's about what you want to see as an individual, which I thought was just a really clever way of being able to say that it's not just something that you could manipulate to be all powerful, but it is actually something very personal in many ways. And that's why we see with Ezra, the voices he kind of knows, there's a few voices he doesn't, but when he goes up to the portals and looks in them, he sees the things that he's most interested in, including when he goes back and sees his parents later on, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that aspect of it, but yeah, it's very much this just intersection of all of this time and space and everything that's around you. And it's almost like being one with the Force. This is kind of, to me, it's like Force purgatory is kind of what it felt like. It's about the only adjective or the description I had to truly come out to what I thought this place really was. It just felt like purgatory.
Purgatory.
A little bit. I mean, it's between everything. It's just the intersection of all of it.
Yeah, I've always, it's a very, we hear Ahsoka, or who is it actually? I think, Ahsoka is the one that says to Ezra, this is an ancient place. Like she recognizes this thing has been around for a very long time. And we'll get into the aspect of the Mortis family and how they possibly play into that here in a little bit. But part of that kind of leans into that whole Mortis aspect and how long they've been around, which this place has been around. But, you said something earlier. You said it was, part of the cosmic force, or it almost feels like it is the cosmic force or the living force or maybe that purgatory or that plane of existence that exists between the cosmic and the living force, right? I don't know, right? We don't really have, again, there's not a really good definition of this, but what I always found interesting about it was, again, just the aspect of, quote, time travel. And I'm using air quotes here because Dave Filoni's very quick to point out that it is not a time traveling device. But then in that same quote, again, we'll get into this here in a little bit, he kind of contradicts himself. And in a lot of ways, I can see where it is, because he uses the description of, it's just a plane of existence where everything is happening all the time. And and the way I interpret that is it's perpetually happening. You know what I mean? Like, you could always go back to certain times and just see them happening over and over again, but it's not necessarily like an actual time machine where doors open in and out, that kind of thing. Where it gets a little squirrely, though, is that we see Ezra clearly pull Ahsoka out of the past into the future. And we'll get into the ramifications and how they kind of explain it in Star Wars as well. But, being able to do that in itself kind of, I think, impacts time. And there's one interesting thing, too. I'm going to go to my notes just real quick. When you watch this episode, I think it's when the door closes. So going back to the World Between Worlds episode in Star Wars Rebels, when the sun he closes his fists and the whole thing starts coming down, there's actually a quote from him that he says, and I hope I threw this in the notes here. I'm sorry, I didn't remember.
Yeah, you have it in here.
Do I have it in there? Well, okay, I'm way ahead of myself here. But yeah, he says something to the effect of when what is it? Something about to the fact that that future can be changed, right?
Right.
You can hear him say that, and it's in the subtitles. It's very faint, but he does say that the future can be changed. Oh, here it is. Sorry. It says the future, by its nature, can be changed, is what he says. You hear the son clearly saying that. So in that regard, because you can change the future, in my head, it does come across as a time machine. Like, the son says it's possible. We saw that it was possible. The one thing that I think kind of distinguishes this particular time machine from others is the fact that you can't just go back to, you can't go back through a present time portal. And we see that in the episode, right? So this is that clear delineation between what we traditionally know as time machines versus what Star Wars has done. When Ahsoka and Ezra are kind of running away from Emperor Palpatine, they split up. She jumps back into her portal. So she goes back into her timeline, whatever it is. And he goes back into his. And Filoni explains this as saying that she knows that she can't just go back to the present. She has to go back into the past. Otherwise, there could be ramifications. There could be some kind of a downside effect.
Otherwise, they'd have to answer the question of time travel, right?
Well, yeah,
it's
exactly.
Genius. It's genius.
Right. But I guess the conundrum or the paradox that we always face with time machines or time travel in any series, and I think this is probably fair to criticize this one as well, is, Ezra, when he's going through and he's walking through and he's looking at all the different portals and he's seeing these different moments that are very specific to him, right? These kind of canon events, if you will, to kind of coin a term that was used in the more recent Spider-Verse movies. He sees these times that are very specific to him, but, why wouldn't he, he couldn't save Kanan, because if he saved Kanan, then they would have all died and he would have never been around, right? That's the whole paradox of if I kill my grandfather, then do I die in the future? Right? How am I ever born?
The moment still continues. You haven't changed. You haven't changed everything about it, at least in some of those moments.
Yeah. The paradox that I have here, I guess, the conundrum is, why wouldn't he go back to, the moment that Kanan was meditating or prior to that, right? Why did it have to be that specific moment? I've got some theories around that. I think it kind of goes back to this canon event. But the other theory I had was the only time that we've seen it in use has really literally been Ezra. He's only seen it twice, right? He saw it once when he saved Ahsoka, and that was arguably the moment that she was about to die. And then he saw it again when Kanan was about to die. So maybe there's something in that, whether it's maybe this canon event or these events are kind of they fit into a kind of broader spectrum of things that can happen, or they're specific to when Force-sensitive users or people die, specifically are about to die, is when you can see these events and no other events, are you can't pull any other events up.
Well, I think that's what it goes back to. I think the intent, I think what Dave Filoni was trying to say as well, or maybe it's Ahsoka, I don't know, one and the same as far as I'm concerned.
Right, yeah.
But it's what you want to see, though. It is very individual, it's very personal to you. And that's what Palpatine is also leveraging, right? He needs to be there in these moments to where Ezra can make a decision, because he needs him to pull him through that portal. But for Ezra, it's about these are the moments that matter or really that stick with him, right? Of something that he feels like he can make a difference in. And you see them maybe a little less so with Ahsoka than with Kanan or with his parents later on. But it was a moment that, he didn't understand. It left an impression on him when he sees the temple crashing down and he knows Ahsoka's outmatched with Vader. And so to be able to see that and come back from the other angle and be able to do something to do about it, to me, that's also a part of Ezra that he would want to do that. And it was weighing heavily on him still. And I think that's what this is presenting, right? This is almost like when you get visions, right? And your interpretation of those visions, but this is more of a reality, and different perspective of that same vision. But you have to be careful about how you interpret the vision. You have to be careful about the actions you take within the context of these moments too, because when you do something, it can cause irreparable harm in some ways. And you have to really make sure you make that consciously of what you're trying to do. With Ahsoka, a little less harm, right? She was clearly going to get hit. She had both lightsabers in the ground. Vader was coming in for the killing blow. He saved her life. But I think really without question, I think it's difficult to really dispute that one too hard, that she would have been severely wounded at the very least. But saving her life has other implications as well. And we're going to find out what those are in the Ahsoka series.
Yeah. And we'll get to that too in a little bit, because I think there's something that's said in that episode that may or may not have been planned with Dave Filoni. You just never know.
Right.
So let's just, is there any reason to believe it's not? I mean, we've already said Filoni says it's not a time machine. I think it is in a way, right? Do we have any reason to believe that it's anything other than that? And I'm going back to like the Spider-Verse, right? Or these, we're in an era of movies right now where alternate realities or alternate dimensions, reality dimensions, whatever you want to call them, exist, right? These multiverses exist. Is there any reason to think that this is some aspect of that? Because I think when this show came out, I mean, that multiverse theory has been around for years and years and years, but it wasn't until the onset of Marvel and all that it really blew wide open. And now we've had all kinds of movies that have come out here recently in like last 5 years or so that kind of deal with this. But any sense that it could?
The only time that Star Wars really flirted with that was like the Infinities comic books that had come out. Like, what if Luke had fallen or Leia took his place and things like that. But no, I think we get really clear. I think even within the episode, we have two quotes. I mentioned them kind of at the top. Palpatine says it is a conduit between the living world, the living and the dead, right? So again, that's not necessarily an alternate reality, alternate dimension, anything like that. And even we get Qui-Gon with the voiceover saying it's a conduit through which the entire force of the universe flows. Again, it's that mix of where, like we talk about when someone dies and they go to the cosmic force. This is kind of that path that they follow almost. Like you can almost see a spirit coming into this realm going to the next almost. I mean, it's not that, but I mean, you could almost visualize it in that kind of way. And so I do view it like that. It's not where we're going to have parallel universes or we're having Earth 295 versus an Earth 616 or something in Marvel. Mm-hmm. No, this is very much you have one Star Wars, reality, but you have the Force that gives you the ability to influence that reality in different ways within time concepts of future and past in your moment here. But there are consequences with it, and there's also ramifications about you can't truly manipulate. This is what I'm really curious about, like what Palpatine would have really done with this, because if you can only go back through your own timeline, really he's going into another one and trying to alter a moment that would have weighed unfavorably for him. And then he goes back into his own time to be able to reap the benefits of it, or whatever those might have been. I'm curious what his actual individual interest would have been if it would have been looking for specific holocrons or something like that. But a variety of activities.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to go to the comments, and feel free to chime in, guys, if you guys have something to add or want to weigh in. Jeff says, "I hope not." Speaking about multiverses, he says multiverses just make everything feel like it's far less stakes. I think World Between Worlds will play it safe mostly. And I would agree. Like, I feel the same way about time travel in general, right? Because you can go back and just change everything. There are no stakes. And okay, let's be clear. Really, if a Jedi dies, sometimes it does feel like there are no stakes because they get to live on through the Force, right? In some ways. And that's kind of special to Star Wars. But the point's well taken. This is a very dangerous kind of storytelling mechanism that was introduced for these 2 episodes only. We've not seen it yet. Again, we're purely speculating that this is going to be introduced in the series, and we'll get into if it is, why and how would this even be used, but it is something that I hope is used with a lot of discretion and used with a lot of control, I guess, making sure that we don't get too crazy here with the World Between Worlds. And we'll talk a little bit too about just how can somebody even access this thing? I think they've made it kind of clear that it is not a, these doors aren't everywhere, and it probably takes a special person just to open this up. Otherwise, Palpatine would have been in this thing a long time ago, of all people.
It's a great MacGuffin, though. It actually reminds me of the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It really feels like you have this really potentially all-powerful object, but when you want to use it, you get really unpredictable behaviors with it. You get things that aren't necessarily controllable in the way that it's immense power, but you don't have a way of directing and focusing that power on a specific object. You can try to influence events, but do you always know what you're going to get? Probably not. And I think there are applications for the Ahsoka series that definitely A World Between Worlds really can play in if they want to. That could have dire, and you would almost have that alternate reality as a point, because you've created a new reality, of course, as a result, which is what Ahsoka's been saying to Ezra in that episode.
Yep. Okay, well let's talk about. I want to go back to what we were saying earlier. Let's get into what Dave Filoni. I think we've done enough here to dance around the subject of what the World Between Worlds is, but I want to get into exactly what he had to say about this. Now, this comes from the season 4 DVD Blu-rays, the behind the scenes footage. And sorry, 80s kid from the 90s just said I just started Rebels season 3, so hopefully this doesn't. I don't know if you want to pause and come back to this show, but. We're probably spoiling some things. He just chimed in. I wonder how Maul ended up on Malachor. That's a good question too, but that's a story for another day. And Keaton, we'll come back to you in a little bit, because I do have the question in here about what Palpatine would have used this for had he gotten his hands into it a little bit later. So,
right.
All right. So Dave Filoni, and honestly, like, we could do an entire show on this quote. There's so many just mind-blowing, thought-provoking things that he says about the World Between Worlds that are sometimes contradicting himself. So he starts off by saying the World Between Worlds, it's not about time travel. He says it out of the gate. It's really not about time travel at all. So very definitive. It's not about time travel at all. It's just about a place where everything comes together and you hear different things echoing throughout time. Okay, I'm good so far. Then he says, because it's all fluid in that moment, it's not the place, in that place, it's not the material thing that's linear. Everything is occurring all the time. So, okay, so like we said, stuff's just happening. You can go back at any point and it's all kind of continuing to happen.
Right.
This is where he says Ezra is more in tune with the things that are directly related to him, like when he was on Malachor and saw Ahsoka, like when he saw Kanan die. Examples that came in that episode. These things reverberate to him, and he understands them. But he doesn't understand the voices around him. He doesn't even know those people. So in that moment, during the DVD, they're playing the voices of Yoda and Obi-Wan. And Ezra clearly says, Yoda, Obi-Wan, after he hears those voices, because he recognizes that. But, I think we hear Rey in there.
Rey, Qui-Gon, you got a bunch of others, yeah.
Yeah, a ton of people. He goes on to say they're like the wind moving, and he recognizes someone like Obi-Wan and Yoda, but doesn't understand the context of anything that's going on. I don't know how real it actually is. Okay, so full stop. Like right there, him
this
saying
is typical Filoni.
I know, it's so non-committal, right? Like he can't just go out and say that yes, this is an absolute real thing. Same thing with the Mortis stuff, right? We've analyzed Mortis up and down. We've done an entire series. We've talked about it ad nauseum at this point, but there's a part of me that still thinks that that probably could have never happened or didn't happen the way we saw it, right? There's just it is a little bit nebulous, a little bit fuzzy there. But that to me, I don't want to say it like lessens the potency of the World Between Worlds or anything like that. But I don't like hearing that he's not even sure if it's real, because the dude created it. Why would he say something like that?
Well, because he wants to leave this open to interpretation for people too, right? He wants the fans and the fandom to be able to interpret in a bunch of different ways, because that's fun. And I think he's a little cheeky about some things, but I think Dave Filoni also likes that mystery and that fun aspect of Star Wars, that debate, that coffee table chat, that around a bar chat or whatever it is. We just
water cooler.
Yeah, wherever you find your friends and you want to debate something and have fun with Star Wars, this is one of those episodes that you could probably debate over and over and over. And we do debate it over and over about what it actually means and how that interpretation could be, And so, he continues to clarify some of that, though, to an extent, right? He's calling them not necessarily gateways and doorways, but you, like you said before, you have to be very specific. You You can only go in and out of the same one. You can't go and pick and choose. And I think when he says it's not time travel, I think that's what he's talking about in particular. I can't set a date on the DeLorean and go back in time in this scenario. I can go back to a single moment. I can influence something, but I can't necessarily go back and do something in that moment myself, aside from briefly interact, but that I can't go into that moment and become a part of that timeline. It doesn't work. And I think that's what he's trying to limit and I think he's kind of created some rules that we're not going to go those boundaries. We can just influence a moment. That moment, once it's gone, it doesn't come back again for a long time, or some other scenario comes back to present it to you.
Yeah, that's fair. And he goes on to, at that point, he says, kind of what you were saying earlier, I don't want to define that for people anyway. He doesn't want to define whether it's real or not, which, okay, fine. I kind of need to know these things definitively because that's just who I am.
Right.
But it's not about me. He says, and this is where you were just mentioning, but it's not this place of gateways and doorways that you just go in and out of. Ezra pulled Ahsoka into the world. Remember that she's smart enough to know that she can't leave through his door. So this kind of brings to the question of like, what would happen? What would have happened if she tried to go through, Ezra's door? Does she hit a wall? Does it not allow? Does the cosmic force not allow her to go through the wall, or does she go through it and there's ramifications? And I think he kind of alludes to that there could be. Well, he does. He says she'd be destroying the natural balance and order of things, so she has to go back from where she came. I want to see that. Like what in Star? Like, okay, I do and I don't.
Chaos.
All right, I do and I don't. Like I'm totally fine with how they planned it. They played it safe. We don't have to worry about these crazy ramifications down the road. But there is a part of me that really wants to know, like, okay, so what happens? What would that chaos look like? What would the unbalancing of natural order look like in Star Wars? I think that's super intriguing. And we'll come back to the quotes and his description here in just a little bit, but I want to touch on the Palpatine part because
that chaos, by the way, is what has made Marvel like unraveling a little bit, by the way. So careful what you wish for.
They've got a mess on their hands now. Yeah. And I'm sure they've got it all mapped out. I mean, it probably looks like a bunch of strings and Post-it pads somewhere on somebody's wall. But right. I'm sure they've got it. But it is, as a viewer, just trying to keep up. Sometimes it can be a little messy and trying to understand, like, keep track of where all these things are kind of connecting and not connecting and the fluidity of all.
Controlled chaos, my friend. Controlled chaos.
Right. But going back to Palpatine. So... Yeah. We hear, I think it's the wolf, it's Doom, or somebody says that this place is a place of knowledge, right? He tells Ezra, what am I going there for? He says knowledge. There's a part of me that thinks that Palpatine was trying to get into the world between worlds for the sake of knowledge, because if he really could see all these things happening, maybe he doesn't even know about manipulating. Maybe he doesn't even know that he could have gone through and pulled people out or done something like that without technically going into the past. But the potency, the power of knowledge and what he would be able to see would be remarkable. I mean, you could definitely see where you could get, but in your head, I guess, I know you had some ideas of things that he would have done with this knowledge, but what do you think his intent would have been had he gotten access to the world between worlds?
Oh man, you think about it. I mean, he could go back and influence anything from the things that are yet to be, right? Because we hear future with Rey. Rey is not in these moments when Ezra is walking through the world between worlds. So imagine that if Palpatine were to learn about Luke and Leia and some of those, the future Jedi, what the power of the Force might be, the Grogus, who all survived, what Jedi still exist, where did they hide, and influencing those moments to truly eradicate the Jedi in a lot of different ways. Or if it was also to find maybe forbidden knowledge, the histories of the old Sith, right? And some of the things that they hid and where those are at, and being able to influence those moments, maybe even bring a new apprentice in that replaces Vader in some way. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of different directions you can go that can cause it just emboldens and strengthens his power. Now, if you bring someone out, like how do you actually, you can't really use that. But again, just by bringing someone out of that moment and killing them or doing whatever, you've completely changed the trajectory of everything that's happened to you or that would happen later. And so he can preserve his legacy in that kind of way for the Empire. It's not necessarily about affecting what's already happened because everything's gone to spec. But think about it from any kind of the rebel standpoint. He can go and take out their leaders with his power, just trying to come through the portal with the whatever the blue stuff was, the blue lightning and the fire and whatever. I mean, just that immense power and being able to go and reach in those moments and do something to a Mon Mothma a Saw Gerrera. But then, like I said, also any future claimants to the throne, he would be able to have foresight on a lot of that stuff. Unnatural foresight. I mean, you could argue that's unnatural in the eyes of the Force, of knowing too much about the future is what we've always been taught. But here you have a conduit to be able to give you unlimited knowledge in a variety of cases. If you can harness that to find the things that you were looking for, you might be interested in looking for.
Yeah. I agree with, I co-sign everything you said. I think that's certainly things that he would have done in that moment, because to your point, everything is gone as planned. Like, he's on top of the world, on top of the galaxy at this point, right? So I don't know that he would do a lot to I don't know that he would do much outside of the things you just mentioned.
Yeah, squashing the rebels probably at the top of his list at the moment, right?
Yeah. Well, and so the one thing that does come to mind is maybe a potential close second, if not a first. Not to toot our own horn, but when Lauren and I did the Life Immortal episode a few months back, right? We talked about how there have been, again, and I'm going to mix legends and canon here, but there have been Sith Lords who have found immortality. It came at a cost, it came at a price, but that's something that, when you think about his checklist of things to do, as now that he's got all the power, we know that he was planning for his eventual immortality. He was trying to find Exegol and that whole story, right? So I can see him going way back, and looking for these examples of people, these Sith Lords who did find immortality, find the secrets, the dark secrets, find out where they failed, and try to, reverse engineer that, or kind of take the same steps but avoid the same mistakes. That could be something that he could do. Or looking ahead, hey, did I really make it out? How does this whole galactic war thing end? Right. Do I live forever? Who takes me out? Oh, this kid Luke Skywalker, let me go reverse that right now. Let me do away with him so he can't kill me, right? These are all things that I think he's probably doing. I don't know that he had the intent of going in there and, pulling people out or killing somebody through the portal without necessarily going in there. I think if he found that out, it's pretty much game over, because you feel like somebody like him, coupled with his Force visions, the power that he has in Force visions, I can see him meditating for days on end, making a decision about whether to do something in the world between worlds and executing on that. So, yeah, and it's a very dangerous thing for this guy to get his hands on.
And then you'd have your opportunity to see what chaos truly looked like, though.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, also, you think about it just with Vader, right? He would have known the betrayal of Vader was coming. I think he was always a bit blind to that in some ways. He was always pushing him, maybe expecting him to at some point, but maybe not in the way that happened. And so, but you talk about being able to change those fates. And again, when we look at Ahsoka, there's still another element there that's relevant to the Ahsoka series within A World Between Worlds, right? That everybody likes to talk about. So it's another thing of how do you turn failure into success? And you bring certain people back.
Yep. Katya has chimed in on the chat. She says, I love the World Between Worlds concept. It's really different, but like you're saying, it's not time travel. Let's get back real quick to Dave Filoni's explanation. We're almost done here. So he goes on to say, let me see, where are we at here? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, so he says it's not a system of doorways like an elevator getting on, off different floors at different times. Right. It's more like the wolf tells us. It's more about knowledge that you can use for your own benefit, for good or bad, for good knowledge that would lead to destruction. So and this is a transcript, so I apologize for the wording here. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but and then he goes on and says that's what it's about in my intention, that it be this ability to walk through somebody else's world, that it's not the ability to walk through somebody else's world. We have to keep being dedicated to being original and creative, and sometimes we take chances, and sometimes we do weird things like Bendu or the mysterious wolves. But I think as long as you work off the principles of the Force that George set up, it doesn't change it, and you don't erode what makes Star Wars special. And I think that's key, right? What he says there at the very end is very key. It's what we've been talking about. It is cool. It's a very neat aspect of Star Wars, but something that has to be used with a lot of control, and because it can get out of hand, right? This would completely change Star Wars as we know it, and nobody wants that, right? Nobody would want that. But in small doses, I think it can be effective storytelling, like we saw with these two episodes, and maybe potentially in Ahsoka.
Yeah, season 4, we said this on the Patreon show, this is when things got weird. And that was kind of the intent. It was to push those boundaries, to try different things. And, George liked that kind of stuff too. And Dave is a student of George, right? I think a lot of this stuff is, when he talks about that student relationship, very often he's talking about his relationship with George through a Star Wars lens in a lot of different ways. And so he's keeping that legacy alive of, the Monster of the Week type of thing, the serial type of episodes that we had throughout Clone Wars and even to Bad Batch, things that are still lasting legacy, But being able to have and take these chances, because George wanted to do more with midichlorians and the true nature of the Force in a very different way with the sequel trilogy. At least that's some of the conversations that have come out over the years. But that Dave picks up on that and wants to do it and try it and be bold with it, I think is commendable. And not everything's going to work out, but I think this one really did, because they gave themselves some level of control and they made a lesson out of it. And that last lesson, right? The lesson of letting go of saying, if I take action in a certain moment, have I considered what my actions and what the ramifications of those moments will be? Mm-hmm. Knowing that everything that happens after that will not be the same, and I might be saving one, but I'm dooming, at least 5, if not, 500 or 5,000. Everything changes on Lothal because they're not there to make any kind of difference. And then where does Kanan go? And so you have that kind of spirit guide a little bit with Ahsoka to Ezra, which I think is really nice, that there is someone to kind of keep grounding him without Kanan, even though he grows into that here over the next couple of episodes of Rebels to at the end. But still to be able to have that and keep things on the rails. They just don't let it go too far off, even though it got crazy and a little spacey and stuff. They still allowed it to remain in its own space and to quickly cut it off, while still giving us the threat of saying, okay, this could be really bad if a Palpatine really does get his hands and gets into this place. That could be irreparable for the entire galaxy, or maybe for the Force. Like, that would truly put the Force at risk. Yeah. Right. If you talk about what's the danger to the Force, that's probably about as pretty close as we've got to it in Star Wars canon, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, levelers too, but hey,
whatever. Those are a natural occurrence in the Force.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And speaking of controls, so on the subject or the topic of who can access the world between worlds, at least in my head, and again, this is never explicitly said, it does feel like someone has to be Force sensitive in some way. Right, whether it's the Mortis family.
I was about to say the Mortis, the way the accessing of the key aspect alone just seemed like it was absolutely required.
Yeah, and I think you threw the question in here about Morai, or maybe I did. I don't remember anymore. But Morai came through the world between worlds. This is the owl-looking bird thing that we presume is the daughter or the spiritual guide as the daughter to Ahsoka. She was waiting there, and she's the one. Just a quick aside, she, along with Doom, Caleb, were the ones that told Ezra to go here to save Ahsoka, right? And we'll get to that here in a little bit because I got a theory on that. But Morai, it would be a Force sensitive as well. I mean, you could argue, when Ezra goes to the portal, he may have gone to the portal just as the portal was about to close, again, with the wolves going around there. We see the stormtroopers run after him and try to jump in, and they're kind of hit. They basically run into a wall and bounce back. So in my head, that aside, it just feels like you would have to be Force sensitive in some way, which is why somebody like Palpatine, through other means, through dark means, has found a way to at least see into the portal, but not necessarily into the portal. And he was probably, now they say that.
He reached through it.
He did go through it. Yeah, he did. And but he kept telling Ezra, I think he wanted Ezra to pull him in. He couldn't.
He needed Ezra. Ezra was the conduit, so to speak, in order to bring him all the way through. Although he could start to push because I think he had a hold of Ezra at the time. So it was almost like they were pulling each other in various ways. So, But yeah, he definitely needed. I think the other part that's really interesting though is that Ezra's connection with Lothal and with this is the temple on Lothal. There were a lot of almost like these nexus points. And so I think it was something also a bit unique about this particular place. And I like that. It has to be something very specific and unique for all of these things to come together for you to do it. And Palpatine, as usual, is using sorcery or whatever you want to call it, the magics, in order to manipulate and create the scenarios that allow him the opportunity to take advantage of it. But he still needs these natural abilities of these other people to really, truly insert himself and be able to get into, or to actually take hold of these objects or take hold of these situations in order to actually exploit them. He's not able to do them entirely on his own, and this is where the Jedi are still marginally useful for him in some kind of way.
Yeah, well, that brings up the question about whether or not is this exclusive to somebody like light side users or non dark side users. Is this something that's off limits to a dark side user, right? They have to have, it's almost like the vampire at the door, right? He can't come into your house until you invite him, kind of thing. You know, not to use that analogy, but
it's a great point. I think it's probably not limited to light side users. I think because you have the son, who is the dark, right, and the daughter. So presumably everybody can do it, but there's just not many of them out there, and they're not known to where they are, I think.
Yeah.
So when they do come up, they're very special and very unique. So, and maybe this is another opportunity of where Palpatine could look for these other really strong focal points in the Force that, again, because he is such a, for lack of a better, really a scholar of the Force, right? He's really a historian of all of this stuff. Yeah, sure. For the good and the bad of it.
Right.
And knowing his enemy quite well. And so I think knowing all of these other secrets are existing and they're all out there, because really the only thing he craves is true and total power. That's really what his main goal is. But what do you think? You think this is limited to one side or the other, or?
Yeah, I think it may, I mean, maybe. I in my head, before I even said that, I always assumed it was accessible to anybody. He just doesn't have the knowledge yet of where it is. And I do believe that there are probably other portals out there. I mean, there would have to be, otherwise it's not going to be in the Ahsoka series. There's something special, like I would agree, about Lothal itself and Ezra's connection that maybe allowed him to access it easily or easier than other people have in the past. But yeah, definitely part of me believes that they talked about, so
Kanan talks about that in Rebels too, when he's talking to Hera, like there's something always bringing us back to Lothal.
Right, yeah. And it's like the Jakku of there.
And it's the temple, but then there was something more to the temple, so it really started to make sense with the Loth wolves and everything else too. So
yeah,
I think he knows to.
I think there is some kind of connection back to the family, because even I think it's I forget the scholar's name, the guy that was in the episode, and he was played by somebody. Was it Ian? Not McDermott. Who was that dude? Ian Kellum, whatever his guy's name is. Anyways, the guy that was playing the professor that had Sabine over there in that episode, whatever his name was. They were talking about this, and he talked about how when he was looking at the Mortis family picture, he said that this family, he found images of them in the Jedi Temple archives of the Jedi, and that
throughout their history, right?
Exactly, throughout their history. So, maybe it was just a way for Filoni to say, oh, I got a great idea. Let's make the family be behind this in some way, without really even kind of putting much thought into it other than that. And that's fine. I don't need the explanation there. But I think they've done enough for me to believe that, yeah, this is something that is exclusive to Force users. It's not very easy to get to. There are probably other portals out there. How you access these portals is probably very difficult, very challenging. Again, otherwise somebody like Palpatine would have found this, or we would have seen other, archival documented examples of people in the past throughout history that have gone through and found this, right? Palpatine probably would have, maybe he did. Maybe that's how he kind of found out about it. But I guess the long story short is it's a very exclusive kind of access. And I don't expect them to kind of just be everywhere, which I think plays into, again, if we want to speculate on whether or not this was going to make it into the Ahsoka series, this would be a very difficult thing for Morgan Elsbeth or, the Fallen Jedi or whatever we're calling those guys these days. They could be on this path to find it for other reasons. So
right. And I think when Ezra goes through the portal, the daughter has a quote that you hear, and it says, "We're the ones who guard the power. We're the middle, the beginning, and the end." Mm-hmm. Sounds a little bit like Bendu kind of at the end, but they're the ones who guard the power, right? And this is something we got in the Clone Wars too, and this is why I think it's kind of open to anybody. It's just power. It's just the Force. It is what it is. How you access it, you have to be clever in that kind of way, and you have to have those abilities, but it really could be used by anybody, and that's why these three individuals were so important with the father, the son, and the daughter, that they were the true guardians, and they had that true balance in order to not allow it to fall into one side or the other, and to constantly offset one another, with the father being the one to keep it all kind of together, right? So that they were the ones who set a lot of these things up in place makes a lot of sense, because they can just be used by any Force user that's strong enough and has the will and the cunning to figure it out.
Yep. All right. Well, let's in the time that we got left, let's move to the Ahsoka series itself and kind of speculate. Again, we don't have a lot to go off of still, even with although, man, they've done a lot of TV promos. Like we said, they were going to, it feels like they've done more, which I assume is because of the writer's strike. They can't get out there on the press junket and talk about the show. And so what better, your alternative is just churn up the multimedia machine, right?
Spam the market with recut ads. Yeah.
Yep. But let's talk about how this could play into it. And there were two things that stood out to me in this episode that maybe not necessarily weigh in on how it could be used, but certainly bridge, I think, the two together. The first is the quote that comes from Doom when he's talking to Ezra as the Doom Wolf or the Loth Wolf. He says, "Restore the past, redeem the future." Right? Restoring the past, meaning go save Ahsoka. Restore the future. I just wonder, like, you could interpret this quote along with the next one that I have as, hey, the Empire's technically not gone at this point, right? Although the Emperor Palpatine has fallen, the Death Star has been blown up again, and we know that the Galactic Empire is now scattered across the galaxy, but they are still a threat, right? In a lot of ways, especially with Thrawn out there. But that quote itself, redeem the future, he could have been talking about this moment that we've got coming up in the Ahsoka series, or even further if they go down this path of reintroducing Thrawn and Heir to the Empire and all that other stuff that could possibly go with it.
I thought you were gonna get through a whole episode without doing it.
No, I just had to say it. I think I'm already off that train. Not the boat, whatever. The other quote that was said in here, again, he could have been planning this. You just never know with Dave Filoni. But there is a line that when they're separating, so Ahsoka and Ezra are running back to their respected portals to jump back through. Ezra says, "When you get back, come and find me."
Right.
We don't know how long he was in the time. We don't even know how time exists in the world between worlds, right? But there is kind of a loose theory that maybe he saw what was going to happen and this was helpful at this point because he comes out of this knowing what to do, right? It was that last lesson. And just on the surface of that, it was the lesson of you've got to do everything to save your family, to your friends kind of thing.
Right.
But maybe he did. Maybe he got a glimpse into the future, and that's why, maybe he got the idea or saw the Purrgil in some way, and that was inspiring for him, or knew that he was going to be gone for some period of time. And so when he tells Ahsoka, "Come and find me," at the time the episode aired, we're thinking, oh, okay, well, this is, come and find me means just, hey, let's get back together because, we're fighting the same bad guy. But you could also interpret this as come and find me, meaning after I've disappeared and for some period of time, and which could be the Ahsoka series that we see right now.
Yeah, he was having visions during these last several episodes, so that he started to have a clarity around what the future was, and he makes that comment to her. He knows that he has an idea of what he needs to do, but then it becomes more concrete, I think, in the next episode, and then, of course, in the finale.
Sure.
So I think, when he makes the comment to her, it's very much, I think he's already... He kind of knows that's the path that needs to be done. But I think, when you look to the future, though, I mean, I'm hoping that's where the series, you have to, like, what is Ahsoka's purpose at this point? Because when we look at what she's done, she was instrumental in some of the things that have happened since, but in The Mandalorian and in Book of Boba Fett, not as crucial in some of those moments. Really cool moments and great to see her on screen, but has she done any monumental movements besides meeting Grogu and being able to find Luke Skywalker, or leading Grogu to find Luke Skywalker to find him? But nothing really else, like nothing monumental. So there's got to be something, though, that brings that credibility to that statement and kind of brings it all back together. Because you're absolutely right. Dave Filoni, while when he made the comment, may not have had a great idea of what that would actually mean. He remembered he made it, though. And so he's going to come back and he's going to make some connection between the two that make it relevant, that makes Ezra's actions, important to take note of and to go back and revisit again once we see those moments.
Yeah. Well, and so going back to Ahsoka now, so, could she use this to, if it is everything kind of going on, Ahsoka seems like the kind of character that knows the inherent risk and danger in a place like this. Maybe let's just assume, for the sake of argument, let's assume that she knows how to get back into the world between worlds. She's figured it out, right? And she is in there now. I can see her as someone who is using it for knowledge, maybe the way it was intended. I don't think it was intended for anything other than just to be there. But, I can see her as a character that's not looking too far ahead, not looking too far behind, but just trying to use the knowledge that it provides to find somebody like Ezra. Or specifically, again, I think to be clear, I think Ahsoka's mission really is to find Thrawn, right? She's trying to put an end to the Empire,
right.
Not allow this phoenix of the Emperor Palpatine or his remnants or his forces to rise up again. So I can see her using it in that regard, but I don't see her using that any further. Maybe she got glimpses of things and she's very hush-hush about it because she knows that, she can't say anything even though she wants to say something because time just has to play out. Things have to play out. The will of the Force has to play out. I can see where she's going down that path, but is there anything specific that you would think she would use to find Thrawn, because Thrawn, yeah, I mean, maybe it's just as simple as, she goes and finds Thrawn and Ezra when they come out of hyperspace and tries to figure out where they're at from that. It could be as something as, innocuous as that, but I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities in what she could honestly use it for.
Yeah, we're assuming that she might be looking for it. She could just be trying to prevent others from finding it and using it because she knows that this is something that should be left untouched, left unknown. Maybe she's out there trying to destroy them too. I mean, probably not, but I mean, you could see where that would be really dangerous for that to be left in the open hands. And if Elsbeth and them are trying to use the World Between Worlds to go find Thrawn and do the exact same thing of pulling him back, you could see where she would want to make sure that she's thwarting that every opportunity she gets. And then see what the opportunity is with Ezra if something like that could actually happen. So I don't know that I don't really know where I was going with that comment, to be honest with you. I totally spaced out on that. But.
Well, so originally the theory that I had, again, back from the first trailer, was that the Fallen Jedi or whatever, again, I don't even know what we're technically calling them.
I don't know. Mercenaries are really technically all they are.
Yeah, I guess at this point. But I had this theory that they were the ones protecting, that they were somehow protecting or guarding this thing. I don't know that I'm really in that boat anymore now that I've seen more of the spots.
Doesn't seem to make sense anymore.
Doesn't seem to make sense. But I do like the idea that they could potentially be using it, trying to use it, and she knowing what, having what had happened and having that discussion with Ezra and maybe spending time there, all of that probably plays into this. And if they are, I mean, I can see where they would be wanting to use that knowledge to pull Thrawn out of the clutches of the Purrgil in that moment, right? Yeah. That would certainly bring him back and all that. And I wouldn't expect them to know the ramifications of what that would mean to pull them into the existing portal. Maybe we're going to see the chaos if they pull them out.
And Lauren and I speculated too that with Shin Hati and with Baylan Skoll, we don't know their backstory and their history, so they might be helping Morgan Elsbeth access a World Between Worlds, if that's what it is, for Thrawn, but maybe they have other more individual and selfish motives because of their history of what they've lost over the last so many years and their upbringings, and because we know their past is a bit checkered and not what it seems on the surface, right? And so there's got to be something else laying beneath there, and so that they would have another angle and they might be wanting to use it, understanding what they've learned about it. It could not necessarily be about Thrawn for them either, or this new darkness. And now I know where I was going with my other comment with Ahsoka.
Light bulb.
The trailers have been talking about, there's a coming darkness. And of course, there's more speculation about this is not just Thrawn. There's really something bigger than Thrawn, or Thrawn's the conduit, whether it's the Chiss or the Grisk or whoever, there's something bigger coming. And so again, I like the idea that Ahsoka is still around because she's the one that sees and senses it, and no one else seems to be able to do it. So she is the one that's also trying to kind of save the future. But it's not just Thrawn; it's what Thrawn represents, but also might be what Thrawn is bringing with him of what's happened over the many years since the events of with the Purrgil and Ezra.
Maybe it's the Aboleth.
Abeloth, yeah.
Or Abeloth, yeah.
Let's bring her back. Let's make her canon. Her name's gonna be Mara Jade. It'll be great.
Mara Jade, the Aboleth. Right. Jeff, on the topic, I've been holding off on this one because it's relevant now. He says, I kind of feel like Ahsoka might think she can pull Ezra out like he pulled her.
Right.
But Shin and Baylan may be looking to access the World Between Worlds for Palpatine's purposes, or maybe it doesn't factor into it at all. So
we just don't know their motives, so it's really difficult because it could go in a lot of different directions. Like, is it personal? Is it restore whatever they thought was the glory days of whatever? What is it for them? And I imagine it's going to end up being a little bit more personal for them. There's something about those characters that I think is going to really. I'm really excited about them. I hope we do have really deep characters with Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be painful if we get that with Baylan Skoll, but it would be really great to have some depth to our evil, maybe not quite evil characters.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. Like I like the idea, not to sidetrack here a little bit, but the idea of these characters still being bad or maybe complex is okay. Right. I don't want. I wouldn't hate it if I suddenly like them, because I know a lot of people don't like. They like they're bad. We get plenty of bad from Palpatine. Like, there's nothing good about him ever, and there never will be. Right? He is the epitome of evil. But
Thrawn's going to be that way for us too. I think too. Right?
Exactly.
We have to remember he's a bad dude. So
he really is. Right. Even though you can respect him, he was still jerk in all of Star Wars Rebels as much as he could for an animated show.
Right. Within the context of the Empire, right? He is a villain through and through. So I think that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. But I would like to see the complexity there of those characters. And like you said, access to the world between worlds. Again, going back to what Filoni said and what we saw with Ezra, they would have to be using it for personal reasons. The immediate thing that comes to mind is something like Order 66. Maybe it's simply preserving or saving their masters, right? It could be something that seems as noble as that, even though how they get there, they've kind of fallen and lost their ways in some regards. But yeah, I think whatever it is, it's going to be a personal type motive. All that said, we only got about 5 minutes here left. I think the question that I kind of let off with at the very beginning was whether or not we feel like this would be in the Ahsoka series. I think when we saw the logo and we saw the star maps and, this crazy language, we all jumped on the bandwagon and said, holy crap, we're going to get into the world between worlds in some ways. And then we were like, whoa, well, let's try to temper expectations because we really don't, like we've talked about on this episode already, we don't want to blow the doors off on this thing, but it would be kind of nice to see it used as a MacGuffin or some kind of a storytelling mechanism. But, I don't know that we need it necessarily in this story, at least the way it looks from the trailers and what we're getting so far. It seems like there's enough here that they could do without having to introduce the world between worlds. It seems like just the nature of where Ezra and Thrawn are and the difficulty that it's going to take to find them, that in itself could present all kinds of, drama and 8 episodes of television. So I don't know that we necessarily need it. Maybe it's something that would be, I think if at this point I'm leaning that if it was introduced, it's probably a MacGuffin, and it's probably something that if they do show it or someone gets access to it, it's going to be, a kind of like what I said with Ahsoka. Maybe we get these flashbacks of where at one point she did find it and we see her looking at different things that are happening, not necessarily changing things, but looking at those things and then coming out and saying from the flashback and saying, I learned that this is a dangerous thing. We can't use it, blah, 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 blah. Or it shows up at the very end and, has some kind of a hook into the final episode or 2 episodes of what it is. And we're left to think, what happens next kind of thing.
It would be really cool to see it live action. I'm just going to say that. It would be really neat to see how they would do it. I'm with you, though. I think you don't have to. I like the idea of that it being a MacGuffin, though. I like them bringing it up. It's a part of Ahsoka now, whether we like it or not.
Right.
The daughter's a part of her, so Mortis is a part of her. The World Between Worlds is a part of her, not just because it's in her logo, but it's kind of a part of her, right? It's a part of her history. It's a part of her story. And Baylan Skoll mentions, what's coming next. He says power. Like power you can't really believe, you can't understand. It's really hard not to say that that's a world between worlds. So do we need to see it? No. Would I like to see it? Maybe in a really short burst, kind of like they did in the Rebels, right? They did a little bit of it. They didn't dwell too much, enough to give you action, but not enough to make you linger there. And then they got rid of it. They destroyed it. But I think to be able to use that for, that's the source of how Morgan Elsbeth and them, they think they'll make a difference, and they think they can make things right, so to speak. I think that would be an opportunity for them to. It's the thing that they can chase and the thing that they can kind of fight over and combat, but not necessarily actually having to dive into it specifically. But that we do bring it into the live action world and we do get something about it. I think that would be really great. I think that would be something that, again, makes it'll bring a little uniqueness back to Star Wars, which, granted, it's been kind of lacking lately. There's not a lot of originality in what we're getting these days. Not as much, at least. And so I think it would bring back that originality and that fun, that weirdness that Dave Filoni can infuse into a show. And I think it would be, I think it would be something that we'll find that we missed. We might look at a little funny, but over time, I think we'd warm up to it, even if it didn't quite land the mark right away.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head to kind of close things out. Regardless if we get this or not, I think the one thing that's probably a fair and true, accurate statement is that with Dave Filoni, if we don't get the world between worlds, we're probably going to get some new aspect of the Force that we had not considered, never thought of. It's probably going to make sense.
We said that with Last Jedi too, but that didn't work out. So.
Well, he wasn't really behind that. Well, no, we had some aspects of it, but not to this tune, like the Mortis and World Between Worlds. There could be something that's introduced, and I would imagine with Filoni behind the writing on this one that we are going to get into the mythos of the Jedi, Force powers, the family, again, or just some new aspect of the Force that we hadn't considered. It could be something even more controversial or more powerful that we're not even considering as a MacGuffin here, or storytelling mechanism with Filoni behind the writing reins.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So, all right. Well, I guess that's it. Good night. No, thanks for.
Yeah, great job, Howard.
No, this was fun. We've been wanting to talk about this thing for a very, very long time, and I think we've kind of selfishly been doing it in and out of episodes whenever we had a chance to bring it up. But it was good to kind of really just set everything out.
It's like Mortis, you just can't help yourself.
You just can't help yourself. We're going to come back to it at some point, hopefully in my lifetime. But
the people I'd like to come back to are the people in the live stream.
There we go. Thank you.
Steph, Alexandra, Music Train, Jack, Sky, Alex, Justin, Jeff, Jorge, Keaton, 80s Kid from the 90s, and Katya. If I missed anybody, my sincerest apologies, not intentional. If you're listening to this, thanks for the download. We'd like for you to come out and check out the YouTube channel. If you like what you see and like what you hear, please consider subscribing, hit the like button, leave us a comment, cantinacast.com/YouTube.
Yep. And I have not updated the credits. I will, though. I told Jonesy I'm going to get them done before this next show on Sunday. So it's just gotten behind me with the vacation, and now I'm like way behind. But thank you, everybody, to all our Patreon members. I will get your name in the credits, whether you're ticking or scrolling or present. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore, but I will get those updated so you guys get the credit that is well deserved. So thank you all for joining us on this episode. And if you're going to be with us on the next episode, I've got a plethora of stuff here, Star Wars and non-Star Wars related, that we'll kind of talk about here on Tatooine Trading Post, which will come on exclusively to our Patreon members. So go to Patreon and pull up the YouTube link there.
This is the way tier. Right? Yep, this is the way tier. You will go find it. And if you're, go there right now. If you've already got it, the link's been out there since yesterday. So please go check it out.
Oh, all right. Good to know. Okay. We'll see you guys here in just a little bit. And if not, we'll see you on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.